Beethoven's 9 symphonies represent the great behemoths of classical music, casting a shadow over everything that has followed them. This is partly because they represent the dawn of the Romantic period in music, where music became centrally about expressing your true self and your innermost emotions, dark and intense though they may be, as opposed to the cleaner aesthetic of structural beauty that we hear in the classical period. In fact, through Beethoven's symphonies you can trace a massive, historically important change in style from the end of the classical period in his first symphonies to the intense romanticism of his final works. The Romantic period is when critics like E.T.A. Hoffmann started hearing music as more than just engaging the emotions, as a world in which man leaves behind him all definite feelings to surrender himself to inexpressible longing. People started seeing music as giving access to the inner, spiritual world, and as having the power of absolute expressivity. It was largely Beethoven who opened up this door to the new era of music. Hoffmann said of Beethoven's music that it opens up to us the realm of the monstrous and the immeasurable. Beethoven's music sets in motion the lever of fear, of awe, of horror, of suffering, and wakens just that infinite longing which is the essence of Romanticism. So Beethoven, and particularly his colossal symphonies, represent a point in history when composers and great works of art started to become revered as almost sacred or even godlike, a gateway to spiritual transcendence. Similarly, Taruskin writes that Beethoven, in history, represents the first lonely artist hero, whose suffering produces work of awe-inspiring greatness that gives listeners otherwise unavailable access to an experience that transcends all worldly concerns. His tragic deafness contributes to this image. Already by his second symphony, he was experiencing these symptoms which would eventually force him to shut himself off from the rest of the world and take refuge in his music. The idea of a deaf composer seems almost superhuman, and it gives us the sense of Beethoven overcoming unimaginable obstacles and triumphing over them. Indeed, most of his best music comes after the onset of his deafness. This theme throughout his life of struggle and victory over adversity is heavily reflected in so much of his music, not least his 5th and 9th symphonies. But there's also his sheer technical innovation. Beethoven's symphonies made radical progressions in musical structure, use of harmony and tonality, use of the orchestra, and general musical inventiveness. And so, listening through the symphonies gives us a great overview of the difficult life and incredible work of one of the greatest composers who ever lived. I'd highly recommend this set of recordings to most newcomers because Karajan has an incredible sense of drama, and his orchestra make a most intense, awesome sound, which is so fresh and epic even 40 years on. I don't think any living musician has a better understanding of how to perform Beethoven than Barenboim, who's had a lifetime of performing his works. In these particular performances by outstanding young musicians from Palestine and Jerusalem, every nuance in Beethoven's scores are brought vividly to life. These performances are simply breathtaking in their scope, detail, sound, and dramatic power. If you want something a little different, you might also want to look at Harnoncourt. This performance is different from the others, very clean, very crisp, and more in line with early performance practice than the other two. But the performances are excellent right the way through.